Welcome, everyone. Almost the final session of the day, and I have the honor to be with Mary here today. Mary, thank you so much for joining us. I don't think Mary needs lots of introduction, but Mary is the former chair of the Elders, a former president of Ireland, and also the UN High Commission for Human Rights. Mary, you've been in the space for a long time, and we wanted to start today to share a little bit of your experience and your knowledge and your wisdom on female leadership. So, what made you start? What made you push ahead all those years ago?
Well, actually, Anna, I had a very early start. You know, growing up in the west of Ireland with 4 brothers, 2 older and 2 younger, I had to learn about human rights and gender equality and using my elbows very early on. But actually, my parents, who are both medical doctors, said to me over and over, you have the same opportunities as your brothers. We will help you to have... And it wasn't true in Ireland, not true at all at the time. Women had to retire from the civil service if they were married. There were lots of issues of discrimination in our laws. And I think what I felt from a very early age is I'm going to do everything I can to make it true. And when I, against the odds, was elected President of Ireland, my whole approach was, I'm going to show that I will do a better job as President because I'm a woman. And that was my way of, saying, I'm actually convinced I will do it better because I will do it with all the skills and all the experience of being a woman and being a woman leader. And that will be the best president for Ireland at the time, and I tried.
I certainly can empathize. I have 2 brothers, so I know exactly what it's like to bring your elbows out. When you were running for president, was there a moment when you knew you were going to make it?
Well, there was quite a long time when all I was doing as a lawyer was making the case. We have the directly elected president in Ireland, which is great, by the people, outside the political system, if you like. And I had felt that I was the 7th president, and the 6 men before me had been older politicians, older judge, etc. And they'd kind of taken it as a kind of, nice way to end your career and not really tried to be very relevant to all aspects of Irish life. And I was very taken by the oath of the president. And I thought, if you're elected by the people, you can be relevant at local level, at national level, and at international level. So I began to talk about this, but even more than that, as I traveled around Ireland, I learned so much about what was happening in the country at the time. And it was quite interesting because Ireland had benefited from the common agricultural policy of the European community as it was then, now the European Union. And there was money available in rural areas and in smaller towns. And they wanted the facilities of cities, but they knew the Irish government was not going to provide them. So there's an Irish word that's like Ubuntu called mehel. And I was listening to all these people volunteering for their community. The spirit of mehel was everywhere. And I started to talk this up, and everybody was delighted. Somebody had been listening. They understood. She understands me. That kind of, she gets it. And that, I think, was what contributed to a growing popularity that against the odds. Because when I was nominated, I was 100 to 1 outsider, and we didn't even put any money on because...
I bet you wished you had.
But you asked, and actually the moment there was an early private opinion poll that showed me I had a real fighting chance. And I remember actually having that moment of, oh my God, I could actually be president. And it was actually, how do I navigate this with my family? I mean, there was a moment. And then I changed from making the case to wanting to be. And I remember that very well, wanting to be president, because I'd become convinced it was a job that would be very fulfilling and very worth doing, and I would give it my 100% best if I could. Yeah.
I really love that. I was going to ask you, what was the sort of defining moment when you felt like you were becoming a leader, other people were seeing you as a leader, but you've just very beautifully laid that out for us. You've obviously been in the space for a long time. Have you had to adapt your style of leadership from those early days with your brothers, then moving to the political sphere and making the case and sort of wanting it? Have you seen a change of how you've had to lead?
Yes, I've actually adapted quite a bit because of different kinds of leadership. I was a member of the Irish Senate for 20 years. I was also at the time a lawyer, and I was teaching law. So I was a teacher, a senator, and and the point was I was very active. And then when you're elected president, you're not so much active as symbolic. And I had to learn the power of symbols, the power of who you meet, who you invite to the, and I started to invite the LGBTI community, poor, unemployed people, people from Northern Ireland. And that was the way of doing, very, very different. And then when I became High Commissioner for Human Rights, it was a sort of mixture of the two. Most of my leadership as High Commissioner for Human Rights was moral leadership, like the presidency, but you also had to be very active and try and help people to fight the fight for human rights and gender equality and rights of indigenous peoples and rights of people with disabilities, etc. And now as the elders, I'm kind of back to very much moral leadership, I think. But what did I learn on the way? Quite late on, I wish I'd learned it earlier, I learned the power of humour. I learned it in particular from Archbishop Tutu. I learned how he would do his little dance, and I often do that dance now. He'd do a little dance and make people laugh.
You're going to have to show us the dance.
And when you make people laugh, they're open to you. It's very powerful. And you then come in with your serious point, because people are listening. They're kind of, they kind of like you because you've made them laugh. And I have this message in particular for young women in the room. Are you listening? Young women, use humour much more. In my experience, young women, when they're getting into a position, work very hard, work harder than the young man, get into the position, are very serious about themselves. They're funny at home, but they're very serious at work. The man comes in and he doesn't do nearly as much work, and he plays around with the lads and he gets the promotion. Come on. So you have to use humour more. I mean, I wish somebody had said that to me when I was young, because I was actually too serious as president. Mm-hmm. It was my one big fault to myself. I made 2 speeches to our 2 houses of the Parliament. And the second one was on something I was passionate about, the Irish diaspora. And the speech has no joke, no self-deprecating moment, no funny moment, nothing. Just preaching. And it was not appreciated by politicians, So I do emphasize, and I learned that from the best, Archbishop Tutu, but also Nelson Mandela, very good sense of humor. Pope Francis, one of the things about Pope Francis, he had a superb sense of humor. I witnessed myself when we had a private meeting with him some years ago. It's not relevant now, but, there's something very human about humor. There really is.
I really like that. I think that's a great piece of advice, and I hope all of you are taking notes of all the different pieces of advice that we hear here today. And like I said, you're going to have to show us that dance next time, Mary. I'd like to talk a little bit about leadership that you've witnessed. Obviously, you've learned a lot on your journey, but was there anyone in particular that surprised you, a leader that surprised you, that you didn't maybe think was going to be a leader?
I think young leaders are surprising me a lot. In particular, one young leader who is here, Shia Bastida. She's 22. She is profoundly mature and wise and extraordinarily compelling. She has a wonderful TED Talk, which I recommend to all of you, that's just come out. She's just a remarkable leader. You can feel the absolute instinct. I don't know where she's going to go, but, and because she's Mexican, indigenous, she conveys beautifully the indigenous wisdom in a way that you can really relate to, and I really admire that. And in a way, I suppose it is surprising that a 22-year-old will affect me so deeply. I mean, we've become very good friends. But actually, I've learned so much from Shia. I mean, she's just brilliant.
Yeah, I think it's a really important point. Each one of us, doesn't matter where you're from,
Yeah.
how old you are, we have the ability to be leaders and also to shape and influence other leaders and really have an impact. So no, I love that example. And today, obviously, let's not talk about politics too much, but what kind of style of leadership do you hope to see more of going forward? What do you think the world needs today to get out of the situation that we're currently in?
I think this is a really important question, Anna. There is, on the whole, a different style of leadership of women leaders, especially women leaders who've come out of the women's movement. We lead in a way that is less hierarchical, non-hierarchical, that is participatory by everybody. Each voice matters in the circle. It's very often in a circle that we sit. And we listen to each other, and we listen with empathy, because people are affected in different ways. But also, the leadership is very practical, problem-solving, seeing the realism of what people are talking about, because we've come through difficulties, we've come through barriers, we've come through hurdles, so we have better understanding of them. And I often think to myself, gender equality includes gender parity. What is gender parity? It is 50% participation. Now just think of the world. If 50% of governments were led by women, we would have such a different world. And I'm not saying women are better than men, I'm saying the balance between the male way of, on the whole, reacting and the female. They complement each other. We would have better leadership. And you see it in governments where half the cabinet are women, or significant parts of the parliament are women. You see the difference. And I think, we're not going to wait for the figures of the World Economic Forum, that something like 2070 something, or, way into the future. We need to really have more women in leadership positions right across the board, so that there is that balance, so that there is that sense of, a more listening, more practical, more caring, more responsive, more empathetic. And, we need it badly. Look at the world.
And I'm sure you were in many pictures with political leaders where there's only men and then there was you. Yeah,
and I now won't go on a panel unless there's at least one other woman beside me. And I now try and say, and a young woman, if possible, please.
Well, I tick one of those boxes. I'm not sure I tick the second one, but at least I'm female, so there's two of us here today. Mary, before we close off, because you have to head on, I'd love to understand, what do you do to regenerate, to sort of, get renewed motivation and renewed power for the fight that you're fighting?
I think there are two things, really. One is I do have a real sense of urgency, and it's about the climate and nature crisis. Because for all the distractions in our world today, this is the thing that we have to utterly keep a focus on, because climate and nature don't wait for us. We are creating real problems. One of my recent hats is I'm a guardian of the planetary boundaries, the 9 planetary boundaries, which gives you a holistic sense of the oceans, even of the air, of fresh water, all of these, apart from climate itself, and the kind of interlinking between them, the processes that keep our planet something we can live in. And we are undermining all of this, and it's interacting. And, we're getting into danger zone on 6 of those 9 planetary boundaries, which is really serious. Yeah. So, I'm wearing this dandelion because I've been very much involved with other women, and a number of you are wearing the dandelion. Just Google or whatever you use to search, look up Project Dandelion. It's a women-led, feminist climate justice movement, women-led, not women only, and it's a movement of movements. We want to link with the indigenous communities, with young people, with business, with philanthropy, with filmmakers, with Change Now, obviously, all of you who've gathered here, so that we can make more visible how many of us there are in the world. We are the majority world, but we're not powerful because we're in silos. We're separate. We need to gather our strength and become very visible together, connected. radical connection, radical communication that people really understand and feel empowered by, and radical collaboration, amplifying each other's voices. And what's happened with Project Dandelion now in the climate space, in COPs, or in the UN General Assembly, instead of women's groups keeping to themselves a bit because they have to keep their funding, or not really wanting to share too much, we're all amplifying the other, talking about the other in a very different way, and it's so powerful. It's so empowering and powerful, and we need to do this. Women-led, get men at all levels joining us, and the feminist way of leading. That's the important thing. The non-hierarchical listening, caring more about those who need to be more cared about, and so on.
It's really clear how much energy and power you get from connecting with other people and shaping and supporting communities.
Yeah.
So maybe this just a call out to everyone here in the room, in the vein of Project Dandelion. Say hello to your neighbor, introduce yourself, and start making those connections. Yeah. Mary, thank you so much for joining us here today. I know you have to go on, but thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Anna.
Thank you.
That was lovely.
Thank you. Mary Robinson, everyone. And that's the dance that you learned, hopefully. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. I certainly have taken away a lot of inspiration and incredible messages from Mary. In line with sharing a little bit more what everyone was doing to showcase their female leadership from the grounds up, I'm really delighted to welcome a panel now that will share a little bit their examples of how they incarnate female leadership and how they support female leadership. So please welcome with me Hannah, Joshua, Sanam, and Shira for this next panel. Welcome. Well, I feel so far away.
Thank you.
Come a little bit closer. Thank you so much for joining me here today on this sunny, beautiful stage. Hannah, maybe we just start with you, just because you're the next one next to me. I'd love to hear a little bit more about what you do in your work to demonstrate female leadership. So what do you actually do, but also to support other female leaders in what they do?
Well, thank you so much, and it's great to be here today. And the first thing I'd like to say is, I don't know if we can reframe this, but I think it's about feminine leadership, because I have a man next to me, and this is an invitation that every man and woman can lead with their feminine leadership qualities. I think it's important to not exclude men from being able to change what we think leadership means. And for me, it's about taking all those things that, as I grew up in the world of corporations, I was told were soft skills, and realizing that they were the superpowers, and turning them from going from a place where competition was what we were told to do, empathy was seen as a weakness, curiosity was seen as demonstrating weakness, having all the answers was seen as the only way to go. And so for me, I came to this pivot point where I just thought, I want to lead the way I would like to. I'd like to take my soft skills and turn them into my superpowers. And so part of my role is simply to create the space for others to do the same, and to feel safe in doing that, and to learn that when we bring empathy and collaboration, we get so much more done. So.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Could you maybe share with the audience here what your role is as well?
Oh, my official role. My official role is CEO of the Earthshot Prize, which I'm actually just stepping down from, which is also part of my belief in feminine leadership, which is to lead with believing that everything you create has to have a legacy that can be passed on. And I have helped grow the prize, and we basically go out and search for innovators that are fixing the planet one solution at a time, and try to put wind in their sails by awarding them, spotlighting them, and convening to create resources and capital to go towards them.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Joshua, you actually are an Earthshot Prize winner. Congratulations on that. Let's give him a round of applause, everyone. And when we prepared for today's panel, you shared some really great insights on the work that you do to support feminine leadership. So maybe you can share a little bit more with the audience what you do to work with women, supporting women, bringing them to new places, to more investment, etc.
Thank you very much. And I will recap something Hannah said. It's so weird when you enter a room where the topic is on women and you see a guy on a panel. And you ask yourself, what is he doing there, right? And I ask myself sometimes, what am I doing here? But at the same time, I think it's in the power of the feminine archetype, and how do we surface that in everybody? And for me, this was the first entry of my work into the climate work. I was working in a very grassroots community in Ghana. The first time I attended COP was in 2016 in Marrakesh, and the organization that invited me was the group called the Global Peace Initiative on Women, based in New York. And it was a women group that focused on women leadership, and they had invited me to COP to talk about local communities and how do we build leadership in local communities. And the most important thing I took for my first time at COP was something that they consistently told all of us, and that was a very simple thing. It was that there is too much dominant leadership, and that is not going to help with the climate crisis as we think about solutions. And their goal was to think about who are the emerging leaders and how do we train and support them to find their feminine archetype and really surface that. And those were a few things that we all have, but when we step into leadership roles, we tend to believe that we need to drop those things to be able to succeed as leaders. So key things, and Hannah, you mentioned them: empathy, care, and collective intelligence. You don't have to be the smart person in the room. It's okay not to know. It's okay not to have answers. And it's okay just to say that, I'm sorry, but this is not something I can contribute to. 2, care. In so many places, the idea is, I'm paying you, you have to deliver. While that is true, we live so many multiple lives and just not the life we live in our workplace. And so often I've come across so many young people who have had very terrible experiences because they had an internship somewhere, they worked somewhere, and their care, their well-being, and their life had no meaning to the company or the organization they were working with. And that generates a crazy experience for them. And eventually, they become leaders, and they repeat exactly the same thing to other people. And we are locked in a cycle of leaders being very brutal to young people. And then the third part, which for me is very important, is empathy. When we look at the climate crisis, I have had the experience that the work I do now and the work I've done across all my journey have only been possible because I've been gracious enough to have female leaders who held my hand and said, I feel and I understand the struggles you are talking about, and I want to support you. And that is very different from you are looking at it from the wrong way, you have to do it this way. Those are two different things, and typically that is what we face as leaders. We are on the table or invited to a table only to be told, you are wrong. And there's this way, and this is how you do it. And just that simple difference of I understand, listening, and how can I help makes a big difference. And for me, this has been just very simple skills that we all have and we can all practice, but that is missing. And that has been my journey in this work. Yeah.
I absolutely love that around reframing the way you approach leadership and you know, like you said, bringing those soft skills to the table and really the softer side and the understanding side of it. So thank you so much for sharing that. And maybe you can also share, because I mean, this is about the leadership that you incarnate. What do you do in your day-to-day to support female leaders or feminine leadership?
Yeah.
Sorry.
So Green Africa Youth Organization, which I founded in 2013, Earthshot Prize winner. One of the biggest projects that we do was understanding that while there's so much appreciation for the work that big companies do, when it comes to cities and waste management, the people who actually clean cities and get cities to be functional and actually do most of the work are individual women waste pickers. In every city I've gone to, I've seen these women with their bags collecting the plastics and getting it to recycling facilities. And yet contracts for waste management are consistently issued to big companies. And these women are not included in the strategy development of a city. They are not included in the resilience development plans in every city. They are just left behind, and they are seen as a nuisance in some cases. What we did was to work with these incredible women who are cleaning our cities in the city of Accra and support them to take their position and place in the local government offices and be an equal partner to the government in developing a zero waste plan, which they were then given access to resources to be able to implement that. And for me, these are human system innovations, and typically when we think about innovations for waste management, we look at tech solutions or other sort of digital solutions and technical solutions, but most often, for us, looking at these human system innovations and recognizing the leadership of women who are doing this work and giving them the actual recognition they deserve. In this case, they are actually the heroes of the city because they collect more waste, they process more waste, and they keep the cities clean.
I love what you're saying there, and I think it links really nicely to you, Sahara, around the work that you do in local communities in Sulawesi.
Yeah, thank you so much, Anna, for the great questions. And I work in biodiversity and nature culture space. And if I can share two stories from my islands, Sulawesi and Indonesia. So last Thursday, Anna, I just got back from Lake Poso. It's in central Sulawesi, and this lake is 3 times of Pari, making it the 3rd largest lake in Indonesia. And our first missions 4 years ago was to save this critically endangered tiny fish, locally called as rono and bungo. And what we did was that we visited, stayed, and listened to one community to another across 23 villages for months and months. And we learned that fishing the fish, rono and bungo, is indeed a livelihood. But not only until we listen to the women, we understand the values of this fish beyond economic terms, that these women reminiscing the joy of serving this very particular fish, not other fish, but this particular fish for their family. They miss the flavor of the rono fish, they miss the softness, textures of the bungo meat. They will told me that, Hama, Sera, ini DP daging bungo dan rono, pe enak sekali, pe lembut sekali. Sorry, it's in my dialects, meaning that, but you could really sense that sense of pride of having this fish as the local delicacy from the lakes. And the fishing really need the traditional techniques that pass down through generations with special knowledge of when, where, and how to fish. So really, guided by the women voices, food and culture become the very heart of our programs. And with my co-director, Mbak Anim, we really just listen, and I really echo what you say, Jonathan. We really serve our service. First and foremost is to be a good listeners to the community. We stay from mountains to mountains, and yes, I'm mentally and physically very exhausted, but that's what I'm doing. We just went from mountain to mountain and really learn and listen to the women, what is the role of forest in their life. And it's not all about the money. For women, for example, Nene Soyo, she's a wonderful, funny 85 years old grandma, and she will share to me that, oh yeah, Sarah, my mother used to take bark of the trees and make blanket to make the family warm. But really, when we want to talk about restoring our nature and culture, restoring the forest, the lake, we really need to listen to women. And the last thing is that by listening is not necessarily to acquiring that information for the sake of the technical side of the project, but really to understand, and as you said, Jonathan, to feel, to really attune to the life experience of the woman. And also, we need to listen to the silence. Because for women, silence can mean so many different things. So when we're talking about solutions, we're talking about impacts, maybe we should pause a bit and ask ourselves, do we listen enough to women, to the people who knows better and are at higher stakes?
You must have had such a fantastic week up there listening to all these wonderful stories. Thank you so much for sharing that. Sanam, last but not least, over to you. What do you do on a day-to-day basis to support female leadership, feminine leadership, to really drive this topic? And you obviously work in a very different space, but an equally important space.
Thank you. It's great to be here. I'm wondering whether I'm at the right conference, really, because I work on peace and conflict issues globally. So I'm listening to fish, and I'm like, I wish I was working on fish, actually. It would be much nicer. No, so I've spent my 30 years, pretty much, in the space of conflict prevention, conflict transformation, trying to stop violence and violent extremism. And I work with women who become peace builders. And it's the same story. It's basically, women are often the first ones to feel and see the rumblings of change and violence. They're often the first ones to feel the violence. But the women I work with, and they are truly superheroes, they're the ones who run to the problem. And they're the ones who try and calm things down and literally stop the killing. We have a finance director at ICAN. My organization's called ICAN because we believe that we should do whatever we can. But he's from Liberia, and he was telling me that his grandmother saved him because they came to take him away as a young boy, and his grandmother said, "You point that gun at me and not at him." And she saved him. So these are the stories, and at ICAN we spearhead it's an alliance of independent, locally rooted women's peace organizations in 42 countries now. And so we're a network of networks, because they're all networks within their own countries. And the stories we hear, so I have a colleague in Pakistan, and they work with young men and women in terms of de-radicalization and prevention of extremism. And she came to us one year and she said, "We found a circle of women, it's a sewing circle, but they're sewing suicide jackets for jihadis." And she managed to engage them, to talk to them about why they were doing this, how this is actually against Islamic values and so forth, and then giving them alternative livelihood skills so that they could still be leaders in their communities, but in a positive way. So it's this transformation. So what we see in terms of leadership is that it's women leading the way, and I call it transformative leadership, because I am not working to say, oh, I want to have equal rights for my daughters to go into the army and fight, or my nephew. My goal has always been that I don't want either my sons or my daughters to ever have to experience the hell of war. So it's transformative leadership, and it's women leading the way. And we see it all around the world, but it is being really, really targeted now, as you can imagine, because we're being told that militarization is the way, and militarization is not the answer to actually the future that we should all be thinking about. So that's the work that we do.
And you're all being incredibly humble. Each one of you on the panel here really incarnates leadership in its own way, and you all have such important contributions to making the world a better place in peace and climate, all the different things. I think they matter equally. So yes, fish are incredibly interesting. I find it fascinating what you were saying about the bark and the blanket, but I think the peace topic is just as important. So thank you so much for sharing that. I've already noted a couple of lessons that I've taken away from sort of all of you, what you said, some of the advice, I guess, on how to be a better leader. What was the most impactful or the sort of most useful advice you've received so far on your journey? Maybe Joshua, we'll start with you.
Most useful advice I've received in my journey, I think it's really this idea of collective intelligence. And the reason I think that is so important, and it goes to something that we just talked about. I'm on the board of an organization called Climate Resilience for All. And Climate Resilience for All works on heat and against extreme heat and building resilience for women. And we have a tagline that says, when women are resilient, we are all resilient. Now, why is that? That is simply because in many instances, women have the incredible talent of being able to really look beyond a very individual perspective, take a community-rooted approach, and say that this is not just bad for this community, it's bad for the entire ecosystem. And we have to move away from that. The ability to do that is being able to be humble enough to listen, and listen very well, collect a lot of those intelligence, and come to a conclusion where everyone feels part of the decision that have been made. This is the single most valuable advice that I've really gotten in my career. I'm currently the co-director for the Youth Climate Justice Fund, and it's a woman-led fund in many ways because we have a board of 6 incredible women who came to me and said, Josh, we want you to be a co-director for this fund, this idea we have which we want to build, and I work with them on that. But the reason why this fund has been successful have been everyone coming to the table to say, we know we want to get funding to youth movement, but we don't know how to do it. So who can we go, who can we learn from, and not iconizing any single person, but really making it a community approach where we don't make someone a star of the work, but really a shared vision, a shared moment, learning from everyone and being able to have everyone feel ownership in the idea. And I think for me, this is, if we could practice that on all different levels of governance around the world, where communities feel like their voice could be heard, and it's a shared responsibility, it's a shared approach. If in a boardroom, every person invited to the table could feel that they're not just invited to the table, but also their voice and their intelligence is feeding into the collective decision, we would make a big difference. Because let's be real, a lot of situations where diversity, inclusion, equity is being met, it's only to put you there, to take the box and to have you on the table. By your voice, the things you are saying do not hold the same power dynamics as others in the room. And typically that is because we do not value shared and collective intelligence.
Thank you for sharing that. Shara, what was the best advice that you've received around leadership?
I think the best advice really coming from my co-director, Mbak Anim, who has been quite not really my partner in crime, but also my soulmate. There's no other day that I don't send a WhatsApp to her and she sends a WhatsApp to me. But really the best advice coming from her and always reminding me that, Sarah, you can be courageous and you can cry loudly, that you can be only 1.5 meter, but you can also just be upset about the situations. But really you can be strong, but you can be tender at the same time. And it really leads me to the acceptance of the complexity and the acceptance of the wholeness of the personhood, and that acceptance that make us and help us easier to create and hold that trusted space for women to be their authentic self, to share whatever it is that they bring to the table. And yeah, that's advice is something that I will never forget, Anna.
I really love that.
Yeah.
Be your authentic self. And then Hannah, you talked a little bit about that at the beginning, of sort of bringing the soft skills to the table. What is the bit of advice that you've received, maybe that really shaped you, but also something that somebody said to you that you think you really should ignore as advice?
Well, when I was 16, I was a little bit rebellious, and I had the whole Mohican, and my parents had just given up on me. And I had a mentor who was a family friend, and he said something to me. He said, Hannah, one day you're going to need to decide whether you are more effective shouting at the system from the outside, working to change it from the inside, or creating something new. And it has really defined my entire career. I've tried shouting from the outside, I've tried changing it from the inside, and I've tried nurturing it and building it from afresh. And what I would say now that I sit here having done that is we are all part of a system. And we need to look at this as an entire system where actually we need all three of those things. And we need to work together and play together. And that one of the values that I think we've all talked about here, which is of what I call radical collaboration, is learning to collaborate across the activist movement, across the corporate sustainability movement, across the people trying to change it from the inside, and across the innovation ecosystem. And we need to work together. And we need to stop competing or acting in silos and help each other. And help each other to succeed. Because when each of us succeeds, then we have all succeeded. And so I think that his mentorship to me helped me get real clarity about where I thought I could bring my skills into the system. But here I sit, and what I realize is the single biggest skill that will define us collectively is how we practice radical collaboration in a way that this world has been created to have us compete always. We're always competing for the same pot of money. We live in a mindset of scarcity, but actually I think we need a mindset of abundance. And within that, figure out how we help each other and become bigger because of it. That's what starlings do when they, you look up at the sky and you see a murmuration of starlings. It's a leaderless movement, and yet they work in flow with each other. And I think that's what we need to take away from this.
I love that. Did you ever share with your mentor that he had such a profound impact on you?
He died.
Oh, I'm sorry. But it's clear that it was, a very early moment at 16 to have such a valuable life lesson imparted to you. Thank you so much for sharing that. Sana, maybe coming to you and building on what Hannah just said, everyone here together, we obviously have our role to play in the system. What was the bit of advice that you received that sort of helped you on your journey?
That's a really good question. First of all, I want to agree with everything that I'm hearing, because the way we work is around collective wisdom and empathy and care and inside and outside and so forth. We have I'm Iranian by background, and we have a line of poetry for every situation. And when I think back to the question of leadership and how to do it and role models in my field, there's a saying where we say, "From whom did you learn your manners?" And the answer is, from the ill-mannered. Meaning that for a long time, I would look at people and I would say, I don't want to be like that person. I want to do it differently, right? Like, that's really, I don't want to be like that. So it was almost like the reverse. I think Mary Robinson was one of the first people that I encountered that I was like, oh, she's a good role model, right? But there were lots of bad role models, but they're useful because they actually help you reframe and think about it. To me, what I have learned and what I try to practice are, amongst women especially, but collectively, are things like, give each other the benefit of the doubt. If Shara is invited to a meeting and the rest of us aren't, don't say, why did she go? It should be me. Say, thank God she's there. How can we help her? She's at the table. Let's occupy these spaces. So that's definitely one lesson. The second is that very often as women, we're told to lower our voices and speak like men and take pauses like the British do. Frankly, I don't believe that. I think you have to be yourself. I think authenticity really matters. And if you're a nice person, be nice. There's nothing wrong with it. Women are constantly told, don't be nice. And it's like, but if I am what I am, I can't turn around and be something that I'm not. And the authenticity and trust come together, because leadership ultimately is about trust. And what I've learned over the time with my partners and with the community that I work with is that if you are authentic and you are honest, radically honest, if you can elevate people and share your privilege, the spaces you have, the knowledge you have, the resources you have, and that you build that trust, that leadership takes you miles and miles ahead. And so that's where I think we should be thinking about, that it is about trust, whether you're talking about the President of the United States or in our communities. But we must think about that, and we must be anchored in the truth and in the humility that comes when you have collective knowledge sharing. And then I just wanted to say, for those of you who are in the audience that have children or are thinking about having children, it's really hard to do activism when you've got little kids. I have twins. And I put it down to, I have a formula, which I call it the NPPP, which is need. Sometimes you need to work. Financially, you have to be independent. It's really important. But you can't just go based on need. You need to have passion for the work that you do. You need to have perseverance to just keep on doing it. Keep your foot in the door, whatever is going on. And then be proud of what you've achieved, because whether it's climate activism or peace activism, it's really, really hard. And we're dealing with the world's most significant problems, and it's very easy to step out, like lots of people do. They don't want to think about it. But be proud of what you've done and keep at it. And you see the building blocks, and you see the next generation coming through. And you'll see that as a mother, you will get through, and your children will be fine, and they will learn how to read, write, and whatever, and they'll go to college and it'll be okay. So, just keep at it, and know that there have been others ahead of you, and we have tried to pave the way.
Thank you so much. As a new mum, that really resonates with me. And I actually recently took my 5-month-old son to the Al Gore Climate Reality Leadership training because my husband had to work. So what was I going to do? And I can tell you the number of people that came up to me and said, "You're the one with a baby, and you're the one with the youngest ever trained climate reality leader." It was incredible. But what was even more incredible was the show of support from other people, women and men, who came up to me and said, "Let me get you a glass of water. What do you need? If you need to go somewhere, I'll hold your son." Complete strangers. So I think we can learn a lot from that sort of a setting. We're almost at time, but I want to sort of close just with very quick fire, sort of 2-second answers. If there was one thing you could change, Hannah, to unlock more feminist leadership, what would you do?
Global systems. I don't know. Look, I think if we were to step back, we are on a trajectory of moving beyond patriarchies, and some people and some groups are trying to keep us back in that. But there are too many of us. We're unstoppable. And the place that we're all working towards is a place of equity and a place and a space where difference is what we value. And that feminine leadership is open to anybody that wants to embrace that. And that feminine leadership is deeply and intrinsically connected to a new approach to what prosperity means. It's a new approach to what it means to be in harmony with nature. And it's all woven together. And I think that if we try to divide these things, people talk about, well, I'm in DE&I, and over here I'm in sustainability, and over here I'm in justice and peace. It's all one thing. We are moving. And there is a huge resistance to that because there are winners and losers in that. And so the only thing I'd say is these things are all connected. And it starts right here in your gut about showing up every day, just reminding yourself, just because it was doesn't mean it has to be. And you are the change that we're all looking for. And remember that in those micro moments of change that you make, in those moments of courage where you pull your chair up to a table where you weren't invited, where you open and speak where you weren't told you had voice, you're not just doing it for yourself, you're doing it for the new system that we're building together. And that matters.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Hannah. Thank you so much to all the panelists for your incredibly insightful answers and for really inspiring the audience and me as well with many lessons learned. I think for me what stood out the most is this authenticity and the collective nature of leadership. So thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
I think you just take them. So we haven't quite finished the session yet. We're going to have a brief interlude, and then we're going to have a fireside chat with Patricia Espinosa, where we're going to be delving a little bit more into her leadership in the climate space. So please do stay, and we'll see you back in a second. little dance interlude. Seasonal. I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by you for our final intervention before the end of the session. Thank you so much, Patricia. For those of you who haven't come across you, and again, I don't know how people don't know who you are, but anyways, just in case, you are the former executive secretary of the UNFCCC, a place that I know very well, work in the same space as you, and I have a lot of respect for the work that you've done there. But you've also had a role within the Mexican government as the Secretary of Foreign Affairs and as a long-standing ambassador for Mexico. So you've done a lot in your career, and we want to use the opportunity now to dive a little bit more into what motivated you with the personal experience that you've had so far, and maybe just to share a couple of leadership lessons with everyone who's here today. So maybe just to get us started, what sort of brought you to the climate space? What motivated you to get engaged in the climate space? And what maybe to this day has made you continue to work in this space?
Thank you, Anne, and very happy to be able to share with you some of my experiences. First of all, let me say that my first encounter with sustainability issues, at that time it was not called climate change. We used to talk about environmental issues. Later on, we started talking about sustainability and then climate change. But it was as a very young diplomat. I'm a career diplomat. My first posting was when I was 22 years old. That's over 40 years ago. So at that time, it became, my first posting was Geneva at the UN, the permanent mission of Mexico, my country to the UN there. And I came across an agenda that was at the time very much related to trade and development issues. So it became very evident to me how important it was to address these very challenging issues for humanity in a cooperative way. How the perspectives were different from country to country, and at the same time, the solutions could only be found if we work together. Then I went on, had a long and very enriching career as a diplomat. I was posted to some countries at bilateral level, but also went to the UN in New York and UN in Geneva. So in all those posts, I could see how important it was to take this cooperative approach. And then in 2010, when I was foreign minister, I was entrusted with presiding over COP16, which was a very difficult moment right after Copenhagen, where we unfortunately had finished the conference without a result, without being able to adopt a result. So it was very challenging. Again, the only thing I could really think of was I need to work to rebuild trust. I need to work to make this collaborative environment alive again. And so that was when I really got immersed into the climate change issues. Although I have to say, it's very clear that climate change is not an independent issue. It's not separate from development. Actually, climate change is at the very center of development. And climate change, biodiversity, desertification, all of those issues are one integrated agenda. So now when you ask me what motivates me, well, my motivation comes from the one side of the fact that I recognize my generation has a big responsibility in creating the situations that have put humanity in the current state of affairs, where we have all these very huge global issues, global challenges. So I think we need to be responsive. We need to be responsible, take responsibility, and we need to be part of the solution. And secondly, my inspiration comes from all of you. You know, I was just listening to the two previous, first the panel and then first Mary, then the panel, and it's just amazing. I mean, how could you not be inspired just by listening to all these voices? Of course, I have been very, very fortunate to meet extraordinary leaders, but I would say that it's important that we see us, every one of us, as a leader, and this is what inspires me.
Thank you so much for that. And I mean, it's very clear that you've been breaking the ground on so many occasions. You mentioned the famous Cancun Agreement. You also brought the first G20 summit to Mexico, to an emerging country for the first time. And of course, you had an absolute pivotal role to play in the UNFCCC and the implementation of the Paris Agreement on a global stage. So your leadership has been also incredibly transformative. And as somebody who works in that space, thank you from my side as well, because it inspires our generation to want to contribute as well. So thank you for that. What I'd be interested in understanding is, what is your approach? You know, how do you sort of break this new ground? I mean, you know, do you sort of have an idea in your head and you say, you know what, I'm going to make it happen? Or is it something that sort of is just organic? I mean, how do you approach these situations when you know maybe it's going to be difficult?
Thank you, Anne. This is a question I have made to myself also. How did you manage? How did you manage really to get Cancun as a successful outcome and lay the ground for Paris? Well, you know, this collaborative approach I was talking about before, this is what really has guided me. And I can tell you, most of the times I have not been really starting from a plan. I want to get here or there. Why? Because if you are going to collaborate, you need to listen to everyone. You need to really take fully into account everything that the involved actors have to say. So if you come with your own preconceived ideas and your intention is to impose them on your partners in whatever negotiation you are participating, that doesn't work. You know, I think you must, of course, inform yourself. You must have some knowledge of the issues. You must try to find where you could find possible solutions. But then, more important than that is to listen to them, to listen really, trying to put yourself in their shoes, not only understand their arguments, but also creating empathy and respect for their views, even if you don't agree with them. And that is, in my view, what is very important. Yes, I don't agree with you. This is why I feel that also that this space that Change Now has created is so valuable. Yes, I'm sure here we have people that don't agree with each other in every single piece. It doesn't matter. We need to find an understanding, a common understanding. And the only clear thing for me has been that a lack of agreement, a lack of cooperation, not only does not serve anyone's purpose, it hurts us all. Yeah. So it is up to us to build that safe space for dialogue, to build that trust, and to work towards finding those areas where we can all come together.
And I love how that also resonates with what was said on the earlier panel around empathy, listening, collectivity. It's so nice to see how there's a golden thread, I think, in some of the advice that you're giving to the audience today and some of the experiences you're sharing. Maybe linked to that, what is the moment in your career that you're the most proud of? Because I think we don't celebrate some of these achievements enough. And then in a second, I'd love to hear also what was your personal biggest failure, because I think we also don't talk about failure enough.
Yes. Well, what is the moment I feel most proud of? You know, I have had this just fantastic career, fantastic opportunities in my life. I have been blessed with a lot of amazing moments, and it's difficult to pick one. But if I have to speak about one, I think I would speak about the moment where we adopted the Cancun Agreement, the moment where, not even the moment of the adoption, but before, the moment when we were presenting the document that I was appealing colleagues and friends to really consider carefully and to hopefully allow us to adopt it as an outcome from the conference. And everybody was standing up and clapping. It was, for me, it was not something that I would say I was proud because they were clapping at me. No, it was a collective achievement. It was that sense of collective achievement that makes me so proud. And I was, I do feel it's, probably the moment that stands out because it was clear that there was a lot at stake. For me, the future of multilateralism altogether was at stake. I felt like, as a diplomat, that I am really fully committed to multilateralism. I just felt if we don't manage here to have a good result, then the whole system will be put into question. Second, it was also clear to me that in the national context, that conference would really mark the Foreign Service for that administration. And for me, as a career diplomat that very rarely becomes appointed as the foreign minister, that was also important. For all my colleagues, I felt I could not fail my colleagues in the Mexican Foreign Service, so that is also why it was so important. Of course, then I do want to talk about, you asked Anne about failures. Well, I would say that having had this great career, it's difficult for me to talk about failures, but I do think we can all talk about mistakes, and we make mistakes every day. And I think that there are multiple moments. You make mistakes at home with your children, you make mistakes with your colleagues in the office. You make mistakes sometimes as a leader when you take some decisions. I think that the important part of it is that you are able to recognize those mistakes, those moments, and to take responsibility for them, and to, if it is possible, of course, to correct them. But if it's not possible, take responsibility for them. And as a leader, you have to take responsibility not only for your own personal mistakes, but also if somebody in your team has made a mistake, it's for you to really have their backs and take responsibility. So I would say it's really about that. I wouldn't say my career has been easy, but I do think it has been easier to, in my opinion, to acknowledge mistakes, ask make an apology, and even sometimes you make an apology even if you are not sure that you did something wrong, right? Apologizing is just so liberating,
Yeah.
and it's really so great. So yeah.
And I think it's very brave to admit to mistakes. And there's a wonderful podcast called How to Fail, which talks very much about, by this British journalist, which talks very much about what strength and power you can draw from failures in inverted commas. Thank you so much for sharing that. We're fast running out of time, and I think I could go on forever. And I sent you 10 million questions that I'd love to ask you, but there's one particular question that I'd like to ask you because your daughter's here in the room today. And I'd like to ask, what advice have you given her in life about leadership that you might want to share with the audience?
Thank you, Anne. Yes, my daughter is here, and she has been the one driving the latest initiative that I took, which was to create this consulting firm on sustainability and climate change. Maria is wonderful. I want to say, first, I have told them, I also have a son, I have told them, and this is something I got from my mentor, my most important mentor, always say the truth, even if you know this is not what others want to hear, even if it hurts, even if you feel that you don't want to, even if you are a bit afraid of saying the truth. Yes, of course, you have to be wise to choose how to say it, when to say it, and to whom to say it. But this is something that has guided me really throughout my life. And this is, I would say, something important, not only for professional life, but also for your personal life. And it's just amazing. I mean, it guides you because then there's never a confusion. You know exactly where you stand. This is one thing. The other one I would like to share, I got from my mother. And there was a moment that we had a kind of discussion. I was very young. I was 22, actually. I had just gone to Geneva, and I came home for Christmas. And we had a small discussion. And then suddenly she turned to me and she said, humility is a quality that you should never lose. And she said nothing more. And she was so right, you know. I was at that time feeling I was already so powerful, and I had, I became independent, and I had gone to live abroad on my own. And then, since that day, it just sticks with me. I think this is very important also.
Thank you so much, Patricia, for sharing that and for sharing all the insights from your heart. Everyone, warm round of applause for Patricia.
Thank you, Anne, and thanks to everyone.
Thank you.
It's not over yet. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you for showing up. Thank you to our amazing speakers and to our brilliant moderator, Anna, for this enlightening discussion. It's been a pleasure to have it on a Change Now stage. And so very quickly, I wanted to give an enormous round of applause and to welcome on stage, because as you might have seen, we have an exhibition of the 25 women that we have nominated for our campaign, our yearly campaign. So they are absolutely amazing, and I really want you guys, you don't want to miss it. And so I would love to welcome them on stage with me. Anna, you can come. I would love also to have all the women from the Change Now team. I don't know if they're all here, because we asked them to come. Come here, girls, come here, girls. You go on stage, right? Where are they? Come on. Because they need some applause as well. You don't see them. Thank you so much.